Here I sit, unspent joy abundant, God's pure mantle settled, unobstructed at the shimmering door. My human heart, a silent echo in its formless center, eternally still, knowing, seeing, untold heavens in motion, spirals of bliss in a waveless ocean's heart. Ancient rings of fire circling, karma's residue, ashes rising like dust eddies lost to the clear blue sky. Layer after layer unfolding, drops of absolute rain sparkling at the gate. God now circling, tethered to my heart, tracing perfect rhythm to my sight. My mind a song to heaven's host, surging at the door. While unsung ancient stillness gathers sunlight from the sky, like God, dreaming is my heart, a glory of shining mind light, more brilliant than the sun. God and I, love, bound apart, as unity in my heart.
Welcome to the Endless Possibilities Podcast, where the journey of spiritual awakening and energy healing unfolds.
Hello, guys. Welcome to another episode of this podcast. My name is Garrett, and I am happy to be here again introducing previous guests from the show, Harri Aalto. I'm going to give Harri a small introduction. I gave Harri an introduction on the last episode, and if you haven't watched that episode, I really suggest going back. I will link down below to Harri's first interview. It got so many views, so many comments. Harri and myself actually went off on a bit of a tangent in that interview and actually produced an incredible talk, and so many people really enjoyed it. So Harri is a author of 2 books on awakening. He's been around for quite some time on various other podcasts. So just let me give a very, very brief description. Harri's descriptions of awakening soar from the mundane to the sublime and take the intimate details, understanding and experience of the awakened state to an entirely new level. He makes clear that this life of ours can be a delightful continuum of perception from the deep liveliness of expanded consciousness to the smallest details of daily life. It is not necessary to go to heaven in order to experience heaven or to be divine. Instead, these are natural aspects of individual awareness that are usually hidden and misunderstood. Harri describes a wide range of spiritual experiences in a vivid way. His account of spiritual journey represents the importance of balance and integration of all spheres of life: material, spiritual, inner, outer, abstract, and concrete. Harri, welcome back to the show. Good to see you. Very happy for you to be here.
I'm very happy you invited me again. I had a lot of fun last time. Let's see if we can do it again.
And Harri, I know the last time you came on, I don't know how many months it's been now, probably 5 or 6 months.
Oh, yeah.
I know you got bombarded. I know you had a bit of a problem with the amount of people.
Yeah, I'm a little bit afraid of that this time, too.
Actually, because we've probably tripled the amount of followers on the podcast since the last time you've been on. So who knows what's going to happen?
It's all okay. I've learned to spread it out a little bit. Right?
Wonderful. Yes, yeah. Yes. And I think the last talk we did is like one of the most viewed talks, most comments. People really, really appreciate the conversation. I know we probably went off on a bit of a tangent talking about the higher states, and some people requested to get you back on and maybe talk about the kind of the baseline states of consciousness, like witnessing consciousness and self-realization. And maybe we can talk about how people can be guided in or experience them states. So, Harri, to get people started, right? I guess people turn up to spirituality with probably a certain amount of suffering in their lives, not
Yes,
like
yes.
the outside world not bringing them satisfaction, fulfillment, something seems to be missing, and eventually they turn their attention on awakening or spirituality.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. I agree with you 100%. And maybe I could review a little bit why I started groups. I've
mm,
always been kind of shy, believe it or not. Now I've turned into a gabber, but I used to be very shy and I wouldn't talk. But, I started talking to my friends 10, 20 years ago. We just had always experience. I was always interested in experience, and they, well, let me tell you a story, okay? So, this is a typical story. Somebody from France visited me. They heard about me somewhere, probably from your podcast, okay? And she she comes into the house, comes to my door. I say, "Come on in." I knew she was coming. She sits down, and the first thing she's been doing some kind of meditation for decades, long time. And first thing she says, "I have no idea what self-realization is. I don't know what the self is. I don't know anything about it. I've been meditating. I have a good life. I've got lots of nature support, but I have no idea whether I have any kind of experience or not." And I said, so you don't have any silence or stillness, right? He says, "No, I got that." And, oh, and I said, "Is it there all the time?" She said, "Yeah, it's there all the time." "All the time?" "Well, I can find it, usually, or always. I can find it. Even in stressful situations, I can find it." And then I told her, "Well, you know what the traditional description of self realization is? It's simple, it's natural, it's just there." And her eyes were getting bigger and bigger. And she says, "What are you telling me, Harry?" I said, "Well, let's look at this a little more. If it's simple and natural, then what does that mean? It's not dramatic. It's not a big wow, but it has some benefits." Now, she says, "Are you telling me I'm awake?" "Well, you have to decide that, but you certainly sound like you're saying that. It's always there. You're always, even in dramatic situations, that calmness is there, that contentment is there, even that slight bliss is there. Is that true?" She said, "Yeah, it's true." And by this time she was knocking her head. "You mean I've been doing all this stuff for 30 years and I didn't know it?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." And I would say that most people, everybody has self-awareness. Even it's just not conscious of it. You have to have self-awareness to be alive. It's the source of everything. And she says, "Whoa, okay." By the time we were finished, she was kind of reeling almost. So she went home, and I asked, "Let's see if this understanding, along with the experience, let's see if this understanding does anything to the experience." A couple of months later, she joined a group and we talked. And I said, "So how's it going?" He says, "What did you do to me?" I said, "I didn't do anything. I just pointed out a few obvious things. That's what I did. That's all." And she says, "Something happened when I began to understand what I was experiencing. It was like something lifted off me, some heavy weight lifted off, some doubt. They all went away, just boom, like somebody turned up the light a little bit." "Well, I didn't turn it up. You turned it up. With a little bit of understanding, you turned up the light of the self. It doesn't take much more than a candle to light a room if it's dark." Okay? And she says, "Well, everything changed. I feel so much better. I feel great most of the time. Life goes on, of course.
Mm.
And guess what? That's happened 50, 60 times, 70 times over the years. And I had to start groups because I couldn't do them one at a time anymore. But the same thing happens to people. It's most people who are on a path and have been on for a little while, some years, and they've seen some benefits. Almost none of them recognize their experience. I don't know if that's your experience, Gareth, but it's mine.
Hi, guys. I hope you are enjoying the show. If you are not already subscribed, I am just asking a quick favor for you to support this channel and subscribing. It really, really goes a long way to helping our show reach new audiences. And the larger our following grows, the larger the guests we can have on the show. So please, please, please hit that subscribe button. I hope you enjoy the rest of the show with Harry. Okay, so what I seem to notice is there's a lot of people who start off and pretty early on they can shift from identifying as mind and emotions to awareness, what I would call witnessing consciousness. You know, Eckhart Tolle, practicing the power of now. They can they can quiet the mind. They can sense that there's an awareness in behind all of that watching. Okay, but what you speak about, it's almost like you're somehow giving the intellect an understanding of what that is, and it's sort of bringing that state on further somehow. Can you explain that a little bit, Harry? Like, okay, so if awareness is independent of thought, right? How is intellectual understanding able to deepen the experience of the self?
It's not intellectual, it's a feeling. But intellectual understanding, now we're not talking about the intellect we use in daily life,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go shopping today, whatever. We're talking about one of the intrinsic qualities of the self. What is it? It's a knowingness. That's a knowledge. That's a very subtle, very quiet understanding. We don't think of it as understanding. I don't consider the experience of what? Of the self, or the first experience of self realization as empty. And well, this comes up all the time. Hey, I have this experience. Somebody might say it's very silent. There's nothing there. No, nothing. No, nobody home.
Mm.
I said, well, then I asked him, so nobody's home? Nobody there? Nothing? You're not having the experience then, right? Oh, no, I'm having the experience. Oh, so you're the experience. You're the knower. You're the self knowing the self. It's not anybody else's self. It's yourself knowing the self. That's the silence. That's the first stage of self-realization. It's foundational. When you begin to understand, it's like, you could say it's like having a bank account. You got a big bank account, but you don't have the access code. You can't use it. Or it's a foreign currency, you don't know how to spend it. You get minimal benefits from that. You can breathe, have a life, do this, get married, children, this, that, all that stuff. But if you're a seeker, you want something more. You have to have an access. You have to understand what you're experiencing. The understanding and the experience aren't any different. They're the same thing.
So would you say both of them are needed? So there needs to be a direct experience of awakening, like a shift, an aha moment, a shift in our perceptions, and then an understanding. Because I've gone through awakenings, right? And they've
Sure.
happened in an instant. And for the next weeks and months, I'm walking around, I'm having my walks, I'm somehow trying to figure out, I'm listening to other teachers talking about the states. It's
That's it.
given me a deepening, it's refining my perceptions, basically.
Well, it's refining your intellect too, your
Yes.
understanding. You said it very clearly.
Yeah.
You got it, got this experience. What is it? Is this it? Is this self-realized? It's too simple? This? Doubts? What? Whatever's going on, you figure it out. You transition into it, or what is it? Acclimate to the experience
Acclimate. Yeah. Yeah.
until you understand, not on the intellectual level, on the deepest level of your feeling. And there's an intellect there somewhere too. It's just subtle. We're not used to it. And after what, 3 months, you would say, oh, this must be it because it's permanent. It's always
Hasn't
there.
gone away.
Permanent. That's the
Yeah.
key. You have a flashy experience. I had this guy. You want to hear another story? This is kind of interesting.
Absolutely, Harry. Yeah.
Okay. So there's a couple. I grew up in Canada, so I have friends in Canada, and they come here to Fairfield from time to time. And and every time they come to Fairfield, we meet and we talk about experiences. And it's a two-part story, but it's short. So we're sitting in the dining room. We get up, we're ready, we finished, and we're going into the living room. And for no apparent reason, out of nowhere, I looked at the lady, her name was Sue, and I said, "Sue, you don't know who I am, do you?" This was no big word of wisdom or Mahavakya, it was nothing. I just said it, came out of nowhere. She stopped walking. It felt like somebody had kind of gently hit her on the head with a spongy mallet or something. She just stood there. I looked at her, and then we kept walking to the to the living room, and she sat down, and I looked at her and said, "Sue, what happened?" First thing she said, "What did you do to me?" I said, "I promise I didn't do anything." And so what happened? She said, "I feel like I've arrived at home. I can't put it any other way. Not my physical home, something much bigger. Don't know what it is, but it's there." First thing I said, let's see if it lasts. Let's see if it's permanent. 3 months later, she comes back to Fairfield, and she said, "Well, it's there now. It was, I guess you could call, I flipped into something, or I transitioned into something, because it's there all the time. It's very simple. I hardly would know it unless you told me what it was. I'd hardly know, so I wouldn't talk about it to anybody." Okay, that's half the story. This lady didn't do much meditation, doesn't have any flashy experiences. I've just known her a long time, and we had these discussions quite a few times. The husband, on the other hand, has all kinds of experiences his whole life. These flashy experiences of unbounded this and unbounded that, and seeing Devas and Mother Divines and unicorns, whatever. He just saw everything regularly. And he said, "Harry, this isn't fair. My wife hardly meditates. I meditate 3 hours a day. I have all these experiences. I've had them for 40 years. Why did she wake up and I didn't?" He was kind of tongue-in-cheek, but he was also serious. And I said, "David, I've always told you, these flashy experiences are great. They're indicative of a, high level of consciousness and all that, and high level of, but what happens to them? They come and they go. They end. And then you're waiting for another one and another one." And I said, you have an experience here, you have an experience here. They're nice and flashy, they're beautiful. But what's in the middle? What's joining them all together? There's an experiencer in there somewhere. There's a knower in there somewhere. You're not aware of that. And he said, "Yeah, you've told me that all along. And you're so attached to these experiences. You absolutely love them. They're beautiful. Your wife was getting jealous of you because you were seeing these divine mothers all the time. You were so attached." Any attachment, whether it's good or bad, overpowering attachment, hides the self, hides that intrinsic value of what? Realization. Of course, he got very intense in the next 6 months, and he went through that flip too. And bit by bit, I went through all my friends like that, until I didn't have any friends. They all woke up and they became some other relationship to me.
Yeah.
Then I started groups. Well, that's the truth. That's the only way I would ever have started talking out loud about this stuff. It had to be totally organic, and I had to be pushed into it from wherever, and that's what happened.
But I think that's the sign of a good teacher as well, Harry, that you're reluctant to put yourself out there, and it's kind of you're being nudged by other people. I think that says a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yes. Okay. So the flashy. Okay. Just for people, right, who haven't had self-realization yet,
right.
and maybe they're confusing energy or visions or devas, these kind of things. It's not the same, right?
I'm kind of a little bit unusual because I've had flashy experiences since I was
And me too.
And you too.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I also had something else. I knew as a child there was something going on, something very nice. And I was a regular kid, you know. I had my slingshots and everything else, running around like a chicken, you know,
Me too.
regular guy, okay, very regular guy, way too much energy, drove everybody crazy. But but I had something. I lived in this field of something. It was always there, pure light.
Yeah.
And I said to my, you know, I was always interested in. I'm not going to go on a tangent about God here, but I'm going to use the word for a moment. I
Okay.
was always interested in, for instance, like because there was a sense to this field. It was nice. I liked it. I lived in it. It was like a turtle shell, you know. If I stuck my hand out, I'd pull it back in because I didn't like it outside of it. It was little. It wasn't a big bubble. But in any case, I started getting interested in God, and I said, you know, God can't just be a light. God has to be more than a light. And that, over the years, ended up being what my search was about. Make pure consciousness more full. Get back to the subject of the self. For most people, it's not flashy at all when they wake up. I'd say 90% of people, it's not flashy at all. It can be dramatic for some people, but even that isn't usually flashy. It's just very simple. But it's something definite that you know. You personally know it. If somebody you trust tells you that something quiet that you're experiencing, let's see if it's permanent, they'll begin to think and look at it. You can look, the little self can look at the big self, no problem. If it's permanent, you can do anything you want. It's permanent.
It doesn't
Okay.
go away.
And you can use your intellect and say, well, it's always there. So what is it? It's really supportive. It feels supportive, almost like a what? A thickness to it that supports you. But it's very delicate and soft and abstract for most people. Most people need to be explained, or in a group, or meet. Gotta hang around with the right people, okay? That's all there's to it, right? And if you hang around with the right people, and there's, say, more than one person who has had these experiences in the group, most people start getting it, getting their own experience, even if it's temporary. That's pretty common. People wake up, they have the feeling it's there all the time, but they say it's not there all the time. It comes and it goes, you know, like it has for years. It just comes. Sometimes I'm very calm and I'm aware of this sense of the self. And then if something dramatic happens, it goes away. My first comment always is, so where does it go?
I was about to say that. Where did it go?
Where does it go? You know, self-realization is a universal phenomenon. It has a kind of a unbounded quality to it. It's unbounded whether you're looking at it or experiencing it or not. So where does it go? My next question is, can you find it at will? Some people, well, I think I can. Yeah, I can find it. Whenever I look for it, I can find it. And, well, therefore, it was there all the time. It's just your attention was somewhere else.
So, Harry, okay, is that self-realization or is that witnessing consciousness? Because for me, I was witnessing for maybe a couple of years, thinking that was that, you know, I was kind of experiencing presence. You know, at will, I could find awareness, right? But when I finally woke up, it was like something woke up through me. Awareness was aware of itself, and it never stopped. It never disappeared.
Stopped having a witness quality to it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Witnessing is the first step of self-realization.
Yes.
Step one. If it's permanent, it's witnessing. If you feel separate from what, you know, there's some feel, but you don't know what it is. Maybe it's even empty. You know, you could call it the no self experience if you like, you know, but when your eyes are working, the self is, you could say inside, even though it's not inside,
Feels
but
like it's inside.
separate from everything. You're
Yeah.
separate from everything. There's a, what? It's just separation. It's not connected. The next
Yeah.
stage is the stage you talked about, is that field knows itself. The self knows itself. Remember that the self isn't an it, it's a you. It's not an it, it's not a thing. It's your essential, foundational experience. You've always had it since you opened your eyes at birth. It was there. You just didn't know it. You're a baby. And then bit by bit, if you become a seeker, you get to recognize the self. Now, that's also a stage. That what you're describing, the self knows the self. It's so just there. It doesn't matter what you're looking at, what you're feeling, how it's there. Like right now, it's just there. And it doesn't get obscured by what you're looking at. Doesn't matter what you're looking at. Your eyes are delivering you this information. Over time, that experience of the senses functioning in regular life, some kind of unification, very subtle, very quiet, begin. It starts with the self knowing the self. It's just there all the time. There's this term that many organizations use, or some use, a unified sense of consciousness, or a unity it's not quite like that, because, okay, let's say I'm in unity, for instance, and I'm looking over there. There's a bookshelf over there. Okay, it's over there. And yet I feel almost like there's a very quiet mirroring feeling to it, like I'm looking at myself. But if I want to look at a book over there, I have to go pick it up. To get out of this chair, I have to go over there.
There's an experiencer of something outside of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to go do it. So it's always, let's call it a very minor witness, because the real witness or the real experience hasn't got any separation. And the separation grows to involve whatever you're looking at, whatever you're hearing, right? It doesn't change your life, but it makes you, it's like a little bit like an armor or something you get, that it no longer is affected by the ups or the downs in the way it used to be.
Okay. And what is that mechanism that changes, Harry? Like for me, it felt like something broke away, right? It was like the witness was somehow attached to my ego, right? And it felt like there was a contraction. And when I felt that tear, it was like pieces of Velcro pulling apart. And it almost felt like the witness like actually pulled away and turned around and became aware of itself. And now all of a sudden, the identification with my ego was no longer bothering me, if that made sense, right? So I wasn't bothered, even though my ego and my personality was still there. It just didn't seem to bother me as much the way it used to.
So what happens, this witnessing quality, that not everybody goes through it. Some people do. Frankly, I don't find very many people in my groups who go through the witness. They tend to go to this more generalized experience of the self. But the witnessing, think about it. If it comes on strong, and I've met people like that, it's not necessarily day one all that pleasant, because you're separate. Separation is separation. You still feel like you know, I've heard some organizations call it enlightened ignorance, because you got both, 100%. You're just
Mm.
as ignorant as you used to be, but you have this feel that you don't know what it is. It's around you everywhere, it's just there. And in the early days of that experience, it can be unpleasant, a little bit unpleasant. And
Mm.
I've had people describe that. Now, what happens is, let's say, remember that the ultimate, or the growing experience of the self, begins to include everything, not
Yeah.
exclude everything.
Yeah.
So that including process the self begins to, it's almost like a bucket you're filling up, okay? You're the bucket. Whatever goes into it turns into the self, but it doesn't disappear. It remains awake within the self. The self, the knower or the experiencer, absorbs it, as it were, on a knowledge level or a knowingness level, okay? And in unity consciousness, that's kind of the first stage of the next stage. It just keeps going, it doesn't stop, fortunately for all of us. And how would I look at it? If you're building a house, you have to build a foundation, right? You got a foundation. If it's a one-story house, it's a certain kind of foundation. And it's a two-story house, needs more foundation. That's the self, foundational experience. 3 stories, 10-story house needs a big, solid foundation. Maybe even a universal foundation. It's just got to hold it all up. But every layer is part of the foundation. What would happen? You can't take the foundation away. You can't remove it. That's the self. So, analogies always fall a little short, right? They don't say the whole story. But the other way I like to look at it, there's only one state of consciousness. And then there's stages within that. Okay? First stage is this witnessing stage. Second stage is a unified value. Third stage would be not just your immediate environment, but your distant environment and so forth. That would be a third stage. And ultimately unity with whoever made it all. That would be the final stage. But final doesn't mean end. Final means it just goes on. So look at it like that.
Okay. And I would totally agree with what you just said. It's been like when you have that initial awakening, that is now the bedrock of your experience. It's self-realization. Okay. And then you get to experience, and the self starts to look out through the eyes. It starts to see itself in the world. So, okay. So from me meeting with lots and lots of people, right, and hearing lots of questions, right, I think I have good questions to ask you about self-realization. So here's one that I get asked quite a lot. So is the self the same as the soul, Harri? Is it the same, or is the soul something different?
As much as the English language can replicate the experience, the soul's the experience.
Okay.
They're the same.
Okay. And is the self the same self in you and I and every other person, or do we have our own individual self that's like a separate self that eventually merges with a greater self?
Let's look at it another way. It's a greater self from day one.
Yeah.
It just becomes more detailed.
Yeah.
No, okay, so I have an 8-year-old granddaughter. We gave her a Lego set, right? Okay, 1,000 pieces. She's excited about building stuff right now, or was. She poured them all on the ground, right? Big pile of Lego. And she's got a plan to how that goes together. That would be a teacher or somebody, but in this case, it's a plan. And she starts putting the pieces together, totally absorbed in every piece, go, putting it together. It's a castle. She's building this castle. And she gets near the end, and it's getting easier and easier because the pieces only can go in certain places now. So she finishes putting it. And the day the castle was built, it took a while. All the pieces didn't mean anything anymore. It just was the whole castle now was totally 100% absorbed. Look at the castle. You can put little people in it, this, that. Only the castle. But she remembers the pieces. She knows that she can describe the pieces. She can take it apart and say, look, now I know where this goes. She can manipulate the castle now, but the castle is important. You could call that the stages of going into some kind of expanded value where everything is included and nothing is excluded. She, in a sense, you could say she became the owner of the castle.
Yeah.
She wasn't the owner. She was having a lot of fun putting it together.
The architect.
Yeah, she was the architect of the building, putting it together. Yeah. So that was very obvious watching that process. It's very nice. Yeah.
Yeah, very good analogy, actually. Okay, and the empty quality that you spoke about, not so pleasant. Like I experienced it quite, not for very long, and maybe a week or two. I had this, okay, the ego wasn't bugging me. I hadn't got loads of intrusive thoughts, but I just felt like a camera sat on the wall, looking out through my eyes. No suffering, but
Impersonal.
but empty, really empty, wasn't very enjoyable. Why is that happening, Harry? What's going on in consciousness there? Where's the fullness?
You don't own the fullness in while you're witnessing, and you don't own your life, the relative. You're separate from it. You
Yeah,
know that intrinsic this experience of emptiness. It's what? It's empty. There's nothing there. It
mechanical,
has,
almost
it,
mechanical. Yeah,
it's mechanical, and it begins to have the effect that so this doubt. What is this? The relative isn't real, or it's unreal, or what is it? What is this relationship? It doesn't seem quite right. You even could get a little what? Reclusive, because obviously the relative is what? It's what is it?
flat, boring. Yeah,
It's boring. Both the
yeah,
self is boring and the relative is. It's not necessarily a great experience, but it doesn't last
yeah.
because it's. But you could call it. You could easily call it self-realization, but let's call it ignorant realization. You have both realization and all the bad qualities and good quality. Not really good quality. You're separate from what you're living. Even you don't even taste this when you're eating your food. It doesn't taste as good because this emptiness is there as well. But it doesn't last long. I posted something. I made a it was kind of a highfalutin experience on Kundalini. I posted it a month ago on my website, and lots of people, thousands of people clicked on it, and lots of good comments. Whoa, I never knew it could be like that. But this one guy, says, Harry, there is no experiencer, and there is no experience, and there is no process of experience. I said, whoa, this is a true no selfer. And I had the thought, well, I should write this guy something. But then I said to myself, but as far as he's concerned, I'm not even having this experience. So
Yeah.
I
What's
wonder
the
why he
point?
wrote such a long thing, a big long couple of hundred words he wrote.
He's I think he comments on my posts as well, Harry.
You know what I mean, though?
But there's always one. There's always one guy, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm fascinated by that because in theory, the self is unbounded, abstract, eternal, no boundaries, no specificities,
Yeah.
other than you know that you're having the experience and somehow you know you're the whole experience. Okay? If you're the whole experience, it's not empty, it's full. It's full of you.
Mm.
You're it.
Yeah.
You're the experience. And most people get that. Somehow they're connected. It's nice. And it grows from there. So maybe you can, the no selfers are on one step of the experience, mostly this witnessing thing that you're talking about.
Okay. Okay. So maybe we could move into the metaphors of masculine, feminine, right? Pure awareness being the masculine, the Shiva, and the feminine being the Shakti. And the Shakti is what kind of animates consciousness and gives it that fullness, aliveness.
You could look at, yes, that's completely right. But you could look at, okay, so the relative, let's say you're not awake. The relative, if you're a thinking person and you're subtle about your thinking, it's always changing. You
Mhm.
could get a little disappointed in that. It's always changing. Everything's changing day, by moment. Everything's different. You could even call it, if you want to get extreme, you could call it a field of death. Everything's going. Where's it going? It's ending. Entropy is get. The absolute is also like that. It's just without human experience, it's just a flat, unbounded, almost nothingness. So you got death here and you got death there in some ways because you're not having the experience, but you're in the middle.
Mhm.
You are having the experience of that. When you wake up to the self, you begin to understand that the relative or the field of change is eternally changing. It's always changing. But how's it changing? It's changing as your experience. That's okay. That's living life. That's nice. The absolute, on the other hand, which was flat up until you came along, You moved into the neighborhood, and now you begin to experience the flat absence, but it's not flat anymore when you're experiencing. It gets lively. So what begins to happen? You're in the middle, you're the fulcrum, you're the central point of the relative, regular life, and the absolute. The relative loses its death quality, the absolute loses its flatness and becomes lively, but it becomes you. You're the one it's only you, nobody else. You're the one that makes the relative worth living and the absolute able to live. Does that make
So,
sense to you?
oh, totally. So the absolute is having the experience of the relative through us. And we are the witness of everything, right? We're the allower, we are the enjoyer. So
We're the experiencer of
we
both.
watch it change. We watch mountains come into play, disappear, life come, disappear, all of that stuff. We sit here, we get to enjoy it all.
That's right. That's it. And keep in mind that the relative's pretty blinking big,
Mhm.
ultimately. And the absolute is pretty blinking big too. And you could say that Shakti and whatever the other one was.
Consciousness, pure awareness. Yeah.
Yeah, pure awareness. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're the animator,
So
not
that's
the
the divine
terminator.
dance,
The
right? The
divine dance. You're
Shakti
the
and Shiva.
Shakti and Shiva. You're the dancer.
And the waking up through the body, Harry, the so okay, so self-realization seems to be awareness becoming aware of itself through the experience, all right? It shifts from being the person, the ego, the mind. Awareness breaks away from the ego, becomes aware of itself, but it's just pure awareness. Now there seems to be another dance that goes on in the body, which is you just mentioned it, is the Kundalini, which is the Shakti rising up and eventually merging with Shiva in the crown, right? The two of them become one. Shakti, so pure awareness and that divine energy that animates creation, they merge.
Anything that happens to consciousness also happens to the body. They're the same phenomenon. One is dynamic and one is more abstract, but both are lively. So the process of going into a unified state of consciousness begins that process.
Mm, yeah.
The reason it begins. So let's look at all the elements of nature. The elements of nature, fire, air, water, earth, and all that. Those would be the external elements. Let's call them external for now. And then there's the inner elements, ego, mind, intellect. They're all made out of okay, you can live 1 minute without the sun, without the earth, even the wind. All the elements of nature make your body. They also make your relative. Same thing. There comes a stage in unified consciousness where it stops being abstract. It begins in that process through the first experience. Oh, I feel connected somehow. It's very quiet. Is it real? Oh, yeah. Where I look, I see it's not that different from me. I feel connected. It still looks exactly the same, but there's a feeling level and a deep understanding level that tells you you're not separate from anything. Okay?
Yeah.
That's the beginning of that connect. On the mechanical level, on the process level, the laws of nature are involved in that. Now, another way of looking at it is that, okay, so there's pure consciousness. So I'm having pure consciousness now. There's a lively quality to that pure consciousness. That would be the knowingness of the self. That's the liveliness.
Yeah.
And there's a subtle relative, subtle divine value. This knowledge level that knows the self has form to it. Most people don't see that form. They just know, this is the self, I am that. But anything that has knowledge in it, it has the knowledge of something. On the finest level, it's divine, it's celestial. Okay? Some people have that. Some people can see it. I can see it. It's there all the time. I can see the silence. I can see the light,
And Harry,
the knowledge.
that would kind of like be a quality to everything. Like everything would have
It's a quality, a divine quality.
yeah,
But you
like a
can,
light.
yeah, if you look at Eastern knowledge, then every impulse of natural law or the laws of nature have a personification as well. That would be the divine level if you look
Yeah,
at it. In an Indian way, these would be the devas,
the
the
Davis.
administrators.
Yeah.
Some people see that. Some people see angels, some people see devas, some people see sprites. They're all derivatives of that liveliness of the self. Well, most people skip that. They just go to unity and they like it there.
Yeah.
Now, once you've had, let's say you have the silence, the stillness of the self, but it's awake. You have some kind of what? Maybe there's just a quality of contentment or bliss. That would be what most people might sense as the divine level. Okay. But then there's the connectedness with your environment, this that comes from that quietness of the movement of the self within itself. I know I am that, and that I am that has a little bit of tingle to it. There's a tickle to it, and the tickle connects you with the environment, and that environment you begin to feel is what unity consciousness. I can see what's happening I've seen it as I've always seen it. It's nothing. It's nothing to write home about. It's just a process. All these states of consciousness are super simple.
Yeah.
You just slip into them. You've had enough experience that you know that. It's almost like, okay, you take a Model T car and you take a modern car that can practically self-drive, right? How many pieces were in the Model T? 1,000 pieces, maybe? How many pieces are in the
Mm.
modern car? Billion pieces. Little electronic pieces everywhere.
Mm.
Took that complexity to make this modern car, make it one comfortable, safe unit. That's like consciousness. You can think of it as getting complicated as you begin to assimilate the relative, the distant relative, whatever. More detail within the self. It's always the self. All of those pieces, just like the Lego set, made a beautiful castle. But you needed them all to make a beautiful. You can have 5 pieces. Wouldn't make a beautiful castle out of 5 pieces. You need 1,000 pieces. In consciousness, you need 1,000,000,000,000 pieces. 100 trillion pieces, but you're not aware of this piece and this piece. You're aware of the wholeness of it all. It makes sense.
It makes
It's
sense.
pretty
And
logical.
I say the same. It's like everything's kind of been pieced together, and at the end, you kind of step back, and it's like the jigsaw piece has the beautiful image on it, and
And you
you
just
get
look at the whole thing in
you
one
get to
shot.
see it all
Yeah,
totally. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. It's like that
yeah,
all the
yeah.
way.
And what you're talking about, the kind of the recognition of the relative being recognized as the self, it seems to be received in a feedback of bliss, would you say?
Pure consciousness, you could, if you want to think about it, divide it into 3 pieces. Absolute bliss consciousness. They're all one, but you could, intellectually, if you want to think about what's in there, what is the quality of the self, you want to make it really fundamental. There's consciousness, absolute consciousness there, and there's some kind of almost pre-bliss quality to it. You can sense it. It's just there.
Mm.
So there's the absolute, there's consciousness, and there's bliss.
And that would be Sat Chit Ananda, right? That's what they would call. Okay,
Sanchetananda.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes, yes. And those are
Okay,
qualities, they're not qualities of the self, they're qualities of you.
okay,
Whether you experience them or not, that's another matter. They're the
okay.
first details of the self, if you will, the fundamental details of the. Remember, the self is awake to itself, and
Yeah,
put yourself in that. You're awake to yourself. It's
okay,
you're alive. The self is alive. It's
okay,
alive. And
okay.
most people don't think of it that way, but if it's your fundamental value, it ain't dead.
Yeah, it's been experienced through the individual, right? It's like a
Absolutely.
liveliness, wakefulness, but
Whatever you
it's
call it.
Yeah, there's a focal point, which is us. Okay, okay, brilliant. Okay, so now unity consciousness, right? And there seems to be different degrees of unity, right? There seems to be a subject object. For some people, the objective, like the container disappears and the self expands out beyond the limitations of the body out into the surrounding. It's like a panoramic sensation. And I experienced it. It was like, oh, it's like I'm now spilling out beyond what I thought I was into everything. And I felt like I was home all the time. But then there's also another level where it seems to be the subject, the experiencer, and the object collapse into one. Can you talk a little bit about that, Harry? Like unity consciousness and maybe the different degrees or levels of it?
You have to think of self-realization like a journey. You're in a river and you're in a boat,
Mm,
beautiful river, and you're paddling down the river. There's first signpost. It's a town.
yeah,
You go visit it. You enjoy it. You go there, and then you've had enough of this town, and you're gonna paddle down. And there's another town. This one's a little more beautiful,
yeah,
so you stay longer. You love it there. But then after a while, you say, well, okay, and then you come back in the river, paddle down, and another one. There's a forest. It's quiet. Oh, I love that stillness, right? And you stay there for a year or two, or a lifetime or two, but not
yeah.
anymore. Things are moving too fast in our world now. So then you paddle, and at some point you look ahead and you say, whoa, there's a huge ocean over there. You're getting closer and closer to the ocean. Now, you don't get lost in the ocean. You don't forget that you were at this point, this point, this point. You've assimilated them, not
Yeah.
rejected them. You
Yeah.
bring them all into the ocean. They become part of your ocean. And that's where I would say, you said it perfectly, but I just add one thing to it. The container doesn't disappear, it gets bigger.
Yeah.
You may not see the boundaries when it's bigger for a while, until you want it to get bigger again. Then these boundaries seem to be there again, but they're big now, bigger and bigger. So unity consciousness is experienced by everybody differently. Same unity. If you were to actually put it in writing and put it in a book and think it through, you'd find qualities that are similar, but you're a human being. You're going to have it different.
Okay, so maybe how I described it is a little maybe there's another way of looking at it. So I described it as the boundaries of it almost looked like what was holding my consciousness. They collapsed or they were blown out. But you're saying that maybe they're still there, but everything has become part of my container? Is that how would you?
Bigger, 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 bigger.
So my container's gotten bigger to hold more experience.
Yes. And more
Okay.
silence, more stillness. Just, it's hard to think of self awareness, which is abstract, that stuff that comes into it, which would be the relative or whatever you're seeing, could actually enhance the stillness, but it does. It's kind of like in unity consciousness, something happened, prior to unity, you have a certain kind of emptiness, let's say.
Mm.
But now that you begin to see your regular life as part of that emptiness, it's no longer empty. In other words, you could say the relative is now enhancing the self, not eliminating the self. They're the same. Two fullnesses,
Yeah.
two fullnesses. They're reflecting on each other. You could say analogy would be that the okay, so you got the self, call it a field of light for now.
Yeah.
The relative becomes a field of hundreds of little lights. What do those hundreds of little lights do? They make the one big light brighter, fuller, richer, because you can see stuff. You can see the movement of that self. No longer is it flat or abstract. It begins to unite the outside environment with the inside until the demarcations on the feeling level, on the knowledge level, not on the physical level, even though the physiology is starting to get involved, those demarcations of separation, which are still there in unity a little bit, become even more transparent. Transparent on the feeling level, not on, you try walking out of this room without opening the door and see what happens. You got to open the door.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Relative life just finds its own fulfillment, and it's your relative life. The relativity goes out of it on the knowledge level and the feeling level. That's unity. One process.
So the inner and the outer become one, it seems.
Inner and the outer become one in the sense that you know they're one, you feel they're one. There's a familiarity to the environment that wasn't there prior to unity, but it remains exactly the same.
Yeah, you can't walk through a wall, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, the scientists do say there's one chance in 50 trillion that you could walk through the wall, but that's a pretty big
Yeah.
You're not going to find it.
Okay, and the experiencer of unity consciousness. Like, is there a falling away of that at some stage? So the subject and the object. Is there a collapse of the subject?
No, not ever. You're always going to be the subject.
Okay.
If you believe in death as the termination of everything, then that would happen. I don't have that experience. I've never had. I think enlightenment is the death of death.
Okay.
It's the only thing that dies.
Okay.
Life is eternal and infinite, just like the self is. But what you want to do, what you would like to do in this lifetime, is have it while you have a body. That's why you came to Earth. You want to have it on all levels. Then when you pass on, whatever happens, happens. But it's going to not be the end.
Okay. Okay. And Harry, I guess what I would ask now is, so the person who turns up in witnessing consciousness, wanting to have further awakenings, where do they start? What's their journey look like, Harry? Because there's so many of them, right? And there seems to be more and more every time, every week. There seems to be more people joining the groups, looking for awakening, looking for enlightenment. What are the first steps?
For me, almost everybody who will come to your group or my group, they've already had something.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they wouldn't come.
Yeah.
They've had some understanding, some desire, quite apart from their stresses and their anxieties and everything else. Okay. I almost hate to say it, but you have to bring enlightenment to Earth first. Step number one.
Yeah.
And then you have to point out to them, you're talking to a whole group now, point out to them how simple and natural it is and how everybody is already designed. You got a heart, you got a mind, you got an intellect. You have to turn up the light a little bit. The way to do it is to find that experience, even the glimmer of that experience within yourself at first. And there's lots of obstacles to that. Oh, I can't possibly have it. I get depressed. I can't have this. I can't have that. I have anxiety. I get people in unity all the time and they're going through hell. But they're in unity inside, totally calm, totally. Their life is a turmoil. That's rare, but I get them. I had one guy who, he had a broken spine. He was in bliss all the time. He was in pain all the time too. These stereotypes we have that you're going to be perfect. On the level of the self, you're going to be perfect. You want that stability. You want that contentment, but you might have some issues in the relative still. Okay? What was your question again?
So, I mean, I guess it was like for people to where they start off. But
Okay.
I mean, you also just touched on something, Harry. I made a video recently where I spoke about awakening being more of a destructive process than your life becoming this complete, perfect fairy tale that a lot of people seem to think it is. It's more, for me, it's more destructive. It's more of a dismantling of the ego, the personality,
I know, but how do you dismantle it? Okay, let's say this room is pitch black. I
mm,
can't see anything.
yeah,
I know I'm in a room and I'm in a space because the somehow these walls that I can't see is keeping all that freezing cold out and the snow out, and so I'm in this empty space. That's the no self experience. You're in the empty space, but you know it's there. You're in this
mm,
space. Turn up the rheostat 1 degree. Whoa, gone. You could say 1% will take the stress away and this away on the feeling level first, on the understanding level, those levels, and then ultimately, the self is it's a very, very interesting phenomenon. We're very fortunate that it exists at all. And guess what it does if you have any glimmer of the self and then you're going through a stressful, what does the self do? It's yourself. Well, it starts helping you. It wakes up a little more. It
it
just
wants to
does.
wake up more and more, right?
Wants to wake up.
Yeah,
That's its role. That's your role. And
yeah,
so you get sick, it helps. But we're all aging anyway. Many other people in my groups are in the 50s and up. I'd say 90%. Okay. So older people must get a little wiser, huh? Not always, okay? I get that. I certainly get that, all right? But there's no limitation to age or young, middle aged, old.
But
Self is
Harry, I have to say, there seems to be a phenomena happening at the moment with younger people who aren't subscribed to beliefs and maybe organizations, and they just seem to be clicking, and it seems to be like a popcorn effect of the younger generation. They just seem to be getting it so much quicker.
oh yeah.
Whereas I do meet with people who have been subscribed to we'll call them organizations, and it has, maybe it brings them to witnessing consciousness, or maybe, the self-realization, but to take them further, it just doesn't seem to have done that for them.
Well, I have both, more and
Yeah,
more young people and more older people. Doesn't mean any difference. They all
yeah,
wake up.
yeah,
But yeah, younger people, well, are starting to wake up too.
yeah.
Absolutely. And are they easier? It depends on how deep people are into some organization. Okay. And people who have, most of the people I know have done everything under the sun. They've done Kriya Yoga,
Yeah.
TM Yoga. They've done everything, shamanism, whatever. They've done it all. It doesn't matter as long as they have something of the self, and you can point that out to them. Then the process of waking up begins really rather quickly. I believe there is a worldwide kind of popcorn effect going on right now. I get so many people, I'm turning them away now. I only get the ones that have popped.
Yeah.
And then take it from there. No,
Yeah.
it's true. I agree with you 100%. I do.
Yeah, I think we live in very exciting times, really, really, really exciting times. And I mean, I also believe that a lot of it is to do with the internet, right? Because we can have 10,000 people will watch this video, Harry, and benefit from it. You know, 10, 15, 20 years ago,
You
they didn't
couldn't
have
do
access.
that. You can now. I got people from 10 countries, and I don't have a big group, but they're from 10 different Australia, New Zealand, whatever. Ireland. Since you came along, now people from Ireland are coming in. I
Yeah.
love it. I think it's great. I'm trying to organize it all in such a way that everybody gets a chance. But it seems to be happening. I think the main thing that I enjoy when somebody goes through a process of transformation, they have some experience, they don't know what it is, boom, and they wake up. It feels like I wake up every time that happens.
And I guess that is happening, right, Harry? Like, because consciousness, it's not exclusive, right? So, okay, so hear me out, right? I think it wants all of its parts to awaken before it can move on, right?
It's kind of interesting. You bring up a very interesting philosophical point. God, in his mercy, or God is in her mercy, made evolution. Evolution means what? Some people are here, some people
Yeah.
are here. If there wasn't that process, there wouldn't be enlightenment either.
Mm,
It's unenlightened people that wake up.
yeah.
Now, from my perspective, that's not true. People who wake up, you could call that the first step of enlightenment, and then there's that second step, and a third step, and a fourth step. So you could look at it both ways. Evolution continues after awakening as well. It's
Mm.
fortunate because, you could say, I'm trying to keep it practical, unity consciousness is beautiful, and it's very, very supportive of life, but you don't really know too much yet. It's not very robust, it's more abstract. The stages after unity start involving the physiology and the senses and bigger values of the relative. Okay?
Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm going to suggest is maybe we don't go beyond unity for this talk, Harry.
Well, it's going to be tough, but we're going to try. I've been doing a good job so
You've been
far.
doing great. You've been doing great. Good. Was there something else you wanted to?
the Yeah, let's say unity consciousness, I consider eternal, infinite, perfect self-realization.
Yeah,
Okay.
me agree. I would totally agree with
I
that.
would
Yeah.
say that. That's because basically most of the people I deal with, they end up in unity, or many of them do. And
Yeah.
we're a CC in the first stage before they're changing, and they're you could call them enlightenment too, but most people seem to have an affinity to some kind of wholeness, or you know, clear experience of unity, not the separation one, even though that's one step towards it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
Okay. And I don't want to have you bombarded again. So,
I
but
don't mind.
if we want to send people to Harry, your website, I'm going to link down below it. Harry, you have two books on awakening, am I right? Just two? Yeah. So we'll link to them as well. Have you got a copy of them? I
Yeah.
have I have one of them, but it's on my Kindle.
Well, I'm going to read something.
Landscape of Enlightenment. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go on a tangent here because you won't let me go into God consciousness or anything. So I'm going to read something. I'm not going to call it a poem because everybody would close off, but I'm going to read it anyway, okay?
Beautiful, beautiful.
All right. It's called Shining at the Door. Here I sit, unspent joy abundant, God's pure mantle settled, unobstructed at the shimmering door. My human heart, a silent echo in its formless center, eternally still, knowing, seeing, untold heavens in motion, spirals of bliss in a waveless ocean's heart. Ancient rings of fire circling, karma's residue, ashes rising like dust eddies lost to the clear blue sky. Layer after layer unfolding, drops of absolute rain sparkling at the gate. God now circling, tethered to my heart, tracing perfect rhythm to my sight. My mind a song to heaven's host, surging at the door. While unsung ancient stillness gathers sunlight from the sky, like God, dreaming is my heart, a glory of shining mind light, more brilliant than a sun. God and I, love bound apart, as unity in my heart. I always liked that poem, even though I wrote
Beautiful,
it.
beautiful. Yeah,
So yeah, it's in this book, The Landscape of Enlightenment, and there's another one. I don't have it handy here, but if you go on Amazon, you can see it.
Yeah,
I
and I'll
don't
put
mind-
links below, Harry, for people just to access them easily. They can go straight to Amazon.
And I don't mind getting bombarded. It's okay. If they come, they come, and I'll go through them one by one. Just take a little time.
And Harry, you hold Zoom meetings where you have discussions on awakening,
Let me
and
tell you
people.
what I do. And then I don't think I did last time. I have
Yeah,
5 or 6 groups, and they range up to 20 people. I try to keep them small, and I interview everybody. It's not an open forum. You have to fill a little form out, and then I interview you. And if you're interested, after you meet me and you don't run like a jackrabbit, then you can join a group, right? And I go on from there. And I'm in an expanding phase right now to the degree that I can be and want to be, but it's kind of turned into a full-time activity for me now.
yeah,
I didn't expect that, but you helped. I probably helped you too.
of
So it's
course.
good. It's going in the right direction.
Of course. And I also feel that the whole purpose of this podcast is to give people a platform where they can, people can come and they can listen into the conversations. And if they resonate with someone, great. There's a
Yeah,
teacher.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, by the time if I have an interview if people get past the obstacles, because you got to fill out a form and they got to focus a little bit and this and that. If they make it to a meeting, I'd say 90% start. And then 10%, I send them back to you. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I think it's a good idea as well, Harry. It kind of, you're being serious, right? You don't want messers
Absolutely.
coming along. Yeah.
No. And I can deal with almost everybody, but, I do have maybe a little bit of a different angle, and if people are, they totally have, issues, they should see professionals, not me, I'm into realization, but you don't need much experience. Even a little bit, tiny bit is enough.
Mhm.
You can't avoid it. If you've been a seeker for a while, then you're going to have some self-realization. That's all there's to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. So, Harry, maybe we'll do part 3 and we'll talk about the later stages. We'll come
Yeah,
back in it. We'll come back and revisit.
yeah. Wait a few months.
Yeah, we'll wait. We'll wait a few months. Don't
No,
worry.
I think we should do this regularly, every 6 months or so. I think it's a good idea. We really get along.
Yep.
You're asking really good, pointed questions, and between this time and the last time, I've talked to more beginners
Yeah.
than I have. So I've learned too, and I'm sure you have too.
Yeah, because I constantly have people where they're asking me questions and they
That's right.
like, and I understand that they really want to
That's right.
those questions are important to them. So,
Absolutely.
yeah,
There are texts, Vedic texts, that say you can't even get enlightenment if you don't discuss it, because you have to resolve all your doubts.
yeah,
That's the thing that gets lifted, your doubts and your anxieties. The 2 things happen. Those have to go. But usually I look at it as the light of the self helps them go.
of course, of
So,
course. And reading Harry's book as well will help.
no, it's great. I love coming to your meetings. It's great.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you. You've been an amazing guest again, and we'll have you on in another few months. We get you back for part 3.
Okay, great.
Harry,
And thank you
thank
for
you so
having me,
much.
and see you soon.
Okay, thank you guys as well, the viewers and listeners. Take care.
Bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
This has been the Endless Possibilities Podcast, where the journey of spiritual awakening and energy healing unfolds. Garrett is a lifelong seeker of truth, a spiritual teacher, and author, and it's his passion to delve into the profound world of consciousness. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and we hope you've gotten something from it. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, the podcast is available on YouTube and all the major podcasting platforms. Find us on Instagram at the_mother_force. Take care, and we'll see you soon on the Endless Possibilities Podcast.